Welcome to Crop 3514 Fruit Production course. This course will basically be covering all about fruit production, especially those fruit crops that are grown commercially in Oman. And we will learn all the practices that are involved in fruit production. So let's get started. The first lecture will be on the structures of flowers and fruits. And I know you already have covered some of these topics, but you really need to know where fruits come from, how flowers develop these fruits. So that this lecture will be about the different types of flowers and the different types of fruits and how the fruits came to existence. We'll start first with definitions. What is a fruit? What is a fruit? What do you call a fruit? There are different meanings to the term in English, fruit. In Arabic, it's actually easier because a fruit in Arabic can be فاكهة and a fruit can also be ثمرة. So there are two different meanings that are very different in Arabic. It's very clear what is ثمرة and what is فاكهة. But in English, fruit is the same word. Fruit means ثمرة and fruit means فاكهة. And that's why there is confusion about fruit fly. Like a squash is not really it is a fruit ثمرة يعني, but it is not فاكهة. So it's not really ذبابة الفاكهة, هي ذبابة الثمار, لأنه squash is not really فاكهة, it's a vegetable. And so the confusion carries along in the translation of what a fruit means. But even in English, fruit has two different meanings. One is horticultural meaning, that is used in horticulture, and one is botanical meaning. In horticultural sciences, علم البستنة, is different than botanical or plant sciences. Horticultural sciences really deals with actual practical cultivation of fruit as a crop, whereas botanical definition of a fruit, it can be any fruit. It doesn't have to be a fruit that is a fruit crop. It can be even, you can consider cucumber a fruit, tomato is also a fruit, corn is a fruit, botanically speaking. But in botany, these are all fruits. But in horticulture, they are not. These are not fruits. What we call fruits are apples, pear, mango, dates. These are fruits. So that's where the difference between horticultural definition and botanical definition. So in botany, a fruit is a mature ovary. So you have to understand the plant has a flower. The flower has an ovary. And when that ovary ripens or gets mature, they form what we call a fruit. So the fruit comes from this ovary. Okay? The whole of the fruit is called pericarp. So fruit crop in horticulture is actually not like that one. This one applies to everything. So this definition of a fruit applies to anything. Mature ovary with accessories, for example, flower parts. It can be anything. It can be cucumber, it can be tomato, it can be corn or wheat. All these are fruits, botanically speaking. But when you come to horticulture, it's not. Horticulture, we are talking about fruit crops. And these are perennial plants producing edible true botanical fruit. They are still botanically a fruit, but in our case, these trees have to be perennial. So they cannot be like one season or two seasons. It has to be year after year after year. And that's why in fruit crops, we consider dates, coffee, coconut, apple, bananas, olive, mango. All of these are fruit crops. So these are fruit crops. Okay? So now you know the difference between fruits in horticulture and fruit in botany. Now, nuts are also considered fruit crops actually, even though they are botanically not fruits, I mean different category of fruits. But nuts are considered as nut crops, and these are also called fruit crops. So these nuts are dry, indehiscent fruit with hard shell, exocarp. Okay, so the outside here is very hard. Okay, and so this is called a nut. So this is a nut. Indehiscent means they don't crack open. See, this one is open, but they are forced to be open. Usually hazelnut, chestnut don't open. They are indehiscent. If they open, they are not a nut at all. Okay, so now we talk about how the fruits develop. You see, this fruit is actually called accessory fruit. Why? Because even though these came actually from an ovary, because that's how this part develops to become this part, but because it has this hypanthium on the outside, which is not part of the original ovary, we call it accessory fruit. This goes for pear and apples and quince. So here is the fruit development. It starts with cell division, which happens here after fertilization. So first fertilization happened, and then we have cell divisions. By this stage, all of the cells that are in this fruit are there. Every cell is there. So that's called cell division. Then cell expansion. So first division, second thing is cell expansion. How they expand, they grow. The cell expansions happens throughout the life of the fruit until it reaches the maximum size. The expansion actually happens because of starch accumulation. Okay, and then after the starch has accumulated for so many months, then starch will have to be declining. Why? Because they will be converted to sugars, and that's when ripening starts. So if you remember banana, for example, when it is green, it has a lot of starch, but when it starts to become yellow, the starch will go down and the sugars will go up. So this is what actually happens. So these are the stages of the development of the fruit from A to Z. Even though the taxonomy of fruit crops is a little bit different than the taxonomy of horticultural crops, but more or less they follow the same system. For example, we have the date palm. The kingdom, of course, is the plant kingdom. The date palm is a flowering plant because they produce flowers, and so they belong to angiosperms. I'm sure you already know what angiosperms are. These are the flowering plants, and they belong the Magnoliophyta. Okay. Then in the classes, the actual date palms are true dicots. They are true dicots. We call them eudicots. So they are dicots. Yeah, we don't have to be confused about monocots and dicots now, but they are actually dicots. And the family is Ericaceae, which includes all the palms in the world. This is the family of the palm, including coconut and oil palm and everything. The genus is Phoenix, and of course the species is Dactylifera. So date palm is Phoenix dactylifera. Okay, and L is the Linnaeus, this guy who named the date palm, gave it this name, Phoenix dactylifera. Okay, so this is the classification of the date palm, for example, and this applies to all plants. Now, in addition to the classification, normal classification of plants like happens in botany, in horticulture, we have more classification in horticulture. Okay, in this we call them cultivars, asnaf. Cultivars is actually short for two words. One is called cultivated, so this part is cultivated, and second var is varieties. So the cultivars actually means cultivated varieties. So cultivars are actually cultivated variety, and these are, some of them are subspecies, some are different. They are not really subspecies. Okay, for example, there's Granny Smith apple. The name of the apple, scientific name is Malus domestica, but the name of the cultivar is Granny Smith. There's also subspecies like Ultra Fuji apple. So of course there's species and there's subspecies and there's a cultivar, but cultivar itself like variety. Variety is different than cultivar. Variety is not cultivated. Just like any variety, any different plant will become a variety. but it does not have to be cultivated. But if it is cultivated, then we start to call it cultivars. We don't call it varieties anymore. Okay, so Malus domestica is the scientific name. X also indicate crossing. If they are hybrid, you know what hybrid is. It's made of two different plants, two different species. Like Fragaria ananasa strawberry, it's made of two different species. One is Fragaria and the second is ananasa. Okay. Same thing happened with citrus. There are so many different citrus species. You will get to know them later on in the course, but they are also named as hybrid, and there is a cross between them. If you look at the families, one of the largest families is called Rosaceae. Citrus is also large, but Rosaceae is much larger than citrus. It has many fruit crops. So this is Rosaceae. It has subfamily. We don't care much about subfamilies, but we care about genus and species. For example, in Bomoideae, we have the Malus, which give us the apple. We have the Pyrus, and Pyrus communis will give us the pear, and the Asian pear is Bayerifolia. We have Sidonia, which give us the quince. Sidonia oblonga give us the quince, which is Sfarja بالعربي. So communis, Pyrus communis اللي هو كمثرى. Malus domestica is the apple. There's also under this subfamily, there's a whole bunch of other plants like Juneberry, loquat, and mayhaw. You will probably know loquats as well. Okay, so this is one subfamily of the Rosaceae, العائلة الوردية, Rosaceae family. A second subfamily is called Brunoideae, and this has all the Prunus species or genus here, including peach, like Prunus persica, almond, Prunus dulcis, ammoniaca, which is apricot, Salesiana plum, domestica, European plum, so Prunus domestica, Prunus avium, sweet cherry, sour cherry, Cerasus, which is Prunus cerasus. So this is the second subfamily. Now this is the third family, the third subfamily, Rhozoideae. In the fruit crops, Fragaria, which is a strawberry, Fragaria ananasa, that is a strawberry. And we have the Rupus, which includes the blackberries, a whole variety of them. The red raspberries and the black raspberries are all under Rupus, okay, or brambles, sometimes they are called. So you can see here one of the largest families in fruit trees is this Rosaceae family. So it is quite large. Okay, where the fruit come from? Most of the fruits are originated in these areas, and that's where they are mostly grown right now, like in China, India, like citrus is mostly in China, and mango, for example, India, Iran, a whole variety of fruit crops and apples and so on. In Europe also, there is France, Italy, that area. Brazil, certain crops grown there, especially tropical fruits, same thing for Mexico. In the US also, there is many different kinds of fruit crops. So fruit crops originated in these regions throughout the world in different continents, and these countries are the largest in fruit production. If you want information about what's the largest, what's the biggest countries producing fruits, you can go to this website. It will give you all the information about different countries, including Oman, and how much they produce of the fruit. For example, this is a chart. It's an old one, but this is from a reference. You can see the largest countries. For example, in African oil palm, it's Malaysia. In banana, it's India. And grape, you have Italy, and so on. It goes on like this. For dates, it's actually Egypt, followed by Iran and Saudi Arabia. We are in Oman, number 8. Okay, so this is one classification of fruit trees. Now we have second classification based on the climate, whether the plant is located in temperate, cold climates, or tropical, which is usually like a estuary, or subtropical, which is in between. So subtropical is here in between. Okay, so usually these are the tropicals, okay, around the equator, and the subtropicals. This is subtropicals. Okay, and this is the most of the tropics is here, and then the temperate, which is above this one, above 40, here 40. So this is about 40, so this is called temperate. They are called climate crops. Also the same thing here, temperate. Okay, and then here we have most of the plants here in this area around the equator are actually tropical, استوائية, because around the tropic of the equator. That's why they are called tropical. So in Oman, you can see that Salalah, for example, is in a tropical region, and the north is subtropical. Okay, so this is another statistics showing the different kinds of fruit crops that are grown worldwide. Most important crops is banana, grapes, apples, oranges, coconuts, plantain, mangoes, peaches, pineapples, lemons, dates, papayas. These are the main fruit crops worldwide, and many of these crops can be grown in Oman, and we grow most of these crops in this country. And also, don't worry about these numbers, but just to show you which is the top fruit crop and who produces it. For example, oranges come Brazil, US, and China. Banana, India, Ecuador, and Philippines. Coconut comes from Indonesia, India, Philippines. Plantain in Africa, Uganda, Colombia, Rwanda. Mango also in India and China. Tangerine as well as in China, Spain, and Japan. Olive in Mediterranean, Spain, Italy, Greece, Tunisia, that part of the world. Okay, so that was an introduction to fruits in general and fruit crops and the areas where it is cultivated, and now we'll move on to the botanical description of fruit trees. Okay, so what is a plant structure? Plant structure is the structure of the plant. The plants can be trees, they can be shrubs, herbaceous, or vines, as you know, like it can be like grapes, it can be like a mango tree, it can be like a shrub, a small like mulberry, or a herbaceous like strawberry or pineapple. What's the difference between these structures? In trees, usually they are single main woody stem, we call it trunk. It has shoot tips that grows every year. However, shrubs, the new growth comes not from the top, not from the shoot tip. The new growth will come from the base of the plant or the crown. You can see that in many different trees, that the base is the source of the new branches, and that's why we call it shrubs. There's also vines or kyanas, the same thing. Vines and kyanas are the same thing. These are also woody plants, just like the other ones. But they are trained, they cannot be on a single stem. So they are trained to have a single trunk at the base, but use twining stems or tendrils to support the canopy. Usually it cannot be alone, it cannot stand like a tree, because vines like grapes, for example. So grapes is also vine, grapes. And so we grow grapes on something called trellises. بالتعريش يعني بالعربي تعريش. So that is vines. Herbaceous crops are different from all of these three, different from the trees, different from the shrubs, different from the vines, and these are herbaceous. So how they are different? Because they are not woody. They are non-woody. These are all woody, woody, but this is not woody. So they do not usually have secondary growth. That's what woody means. Here's a tree standing on a single stem. We call it trunk, and all the new growth comes from the top. So that's what makes a tree a tree. A coffee is a shrub, so all the new growth will start from the base, from the bottom. Okay, this is a tree. Why? Because all the new growth is on top. And of course, for the coffee, all the new growth is at the bottom. So you can also train the plant to make it single stem, even though it is a shrub. For example, citrus. Citrus is actually a kind of shrub, but because we train it and prune it, it looks like a tree. It's not actually a tree. If you look at grapes or kiwi or passion fruit, they are all vines. So they don't stand on their own as a stem, but you really have to have a trellis where you grow them on wires. Herbaceous fruit trees include bananas and pineapples and strawberry. All these are herbaceous fruit trees. This is the structure of the tree, of the plant. Now we come to the details about the leaves. And the leaves are actually can be simple, which made of one, or they can be compound, which is made of different. So this is one leaf, one leaf, but it is compound leaf because it has leaflets. We call these leaflets. This has leaflets, this has leaflets. Date palm, for example, has leaflets. This is one leaf, so this is simple. It looks like this, but it's actually one leaf. This is compound. This is not simple. This is simple, this is simple, this is simple, this is simple, this is simple. And this one is also simple. The rest are all compound. The structure of the flower is also very important because this is where we get our fruit from. So flowers always have four parts, as you know. Sepals on the outside, the green ones. Petal, the colored one, that's what makes the roses red, the petals. Stamens are the male parts, carpels or pistils are the female part of the flower. All of these parts are held by one part, we call it a receptacle, so it holds it all together. Now these sepals can be more than one, in that case we call it calyx. If there is more than one sepal, it is called calyx. There is more than one petal, we call it corolla. Both of these, calyx and corolla, is called perianth. So perianth is actually a combination of sepals and petals. Now let's go back. This is about sepals and petals. Now how about the stamens and carpels? Stamens is the male part. It's actually made of two things, the anther and the filament. So in the flower you have the anther, and then you have, here's the anther, and that's the filament. In the female, androecium and gynoecium, it's made up of carpel or pistil, and this is actually three types. So here we have stigma, then style, and ovary. So stigma, style, and ovary, and this is called carpel or pistil. So this is carpel or pistil, and this is the stamen, which is made of the filaments and the anther. Anther is carrying what? The pollen grains, and here we have the ovules. So inside the ovary there are ovules, and inside the anther there is the pollen. Here is a diagram that shows everything. This is the anther, this is the filament, this is called stamen. Here is stigma, here is the style, here is the ovary, this is called the pistil. Here we have the petals, 1, 2, 3, together they are all these petals. They are one that give you color, and the calyx, this is called corolla. So the three of them called corolla. The sepals, 1 and 2, the two of them called calyx. So that is the structure of the leaf. Now where's the ovary? The ovary is here. So if the ovary is here, above all the other parts, we call it superior ovary. It's in the middle of the flower, we call it centrally positioned ovary or perigynous. If we have below all the other part, like this one, we call it epigynous, and it is inferior ovary. So we have superior, and we have inferior, and one in the middle. Now flower structures are very different between each other. Some flowers are called complete flowers. That means they have all these four parts. What are the four parts again? Sepals, petals, stamens, and carpels. So we have sepals, petals, stamen, which is made of anther and filament, and carpels or pistil, which is made of the three parts, which is stigma, style, and ovary. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4. If you have all these four parts, it's called complete flower. If one is missing, one of these is missing, it is incomplete flowers. It's lack one or more of these 4 sets. Now, that's called completeness. Now I have another thing called perfectness, which makes the flower perfect. We have one perfect flower, which has both male and female, so it's perfect flower. But we also have flowers that is imperfect. That means it's either male or female. An example of that is date palm. Date palm can be a male or a female. It can't be both. So date palm is imperfect. And because it is imperfect, if it is a male date palm, then it doesn't have a female, right? It doesn't have this part, and therefore it is also incomplete. So all the imperfect is actually incomplete as well. But perfect, they can be complete or not complete. It depends. Do they have sepals and petals? Yes. Then they are complete. Do they lack sepals or petals or both? Then they are we call them incomplete because they lack one of these sepals or petals, even though they are perfect. But because they are imperfect, these flowers are imperfect, then they are considered incomplete. Here's a complete flower. That means it has the 4 parts. It's complete, perfect. Why complete? Because it has 1 sepals, it has the petals, it has the pistil, it has the stamen. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Khalas, this is complete. And perfect. Why it's perfect? Because it has the stamen and it has the pistil. Male and female are all there. So it is also perfect. So complete and perfect. This one is incomplete and imperfect. Of course, because it is imperfect, it will automatically be incomplete. What is lacking? It's lacking the stamen. There is no stamen. So this is only a female flower. There is no stamen. There is no male part. You can see this part is missing. This one, it's not there. It's not there. So even though it has petals, it has sepals, it has pistil, but it doesn't have stamen. So it is incomplete and imperfect as well. What happens if it has stamen and it doesn't have petal? If it has stamen and no petals, it will be perfect but incomplete. Now you understand the idea. More classification of the fruit trees include something called monocots and dicots. As I told you before, there's monocots and true dicots. So monocots usually flowers are units of 3. That means they are made of 3 sepals, 6 sepals, 9 sepals. So that's how it is for banana, date palm, pineapple. All the monocots are units of 3. Or dicots are 4s or 5s. That includes citrus, mango, guava, papaya. This is how you know the monocot and dicot flower. Some of the flowers are alone, single, solitary they call them. And some of the flowers are inflorescence. That means the whole bunch of flowers together. Now this cluster of flowers inflorescence is either determinant, like the topmost flower is the most mature and opens first. Example of that is the lime, cyme and the lime. Or indeterminate, which is the opposite of this one. The topmost flower is the least mature and opens last. See, this is open first and most mature for determinant. But indeterminate, like raceme, mango, it says the top flowers is the least mature and the last one to be ready. Let's look at them. Here is a raceme like mango. So the last flower is the last. And if we have cyme, which is like citrus, this looks like mango, then the last flower is actually ready, mature, open. The first to open. This is the last to open. You can see this one's open before that one. This is the opposite. So this is called cyme, and this is the case of citrus. And then we have raceme like mango. But also we have spike like date palm, pinnacle like many other fruits, corycomb, solitary, single flower, and catkins like many other fruits as well, like walnuts, for example. So now you can see the raceme. The top flower is the last to mature, but in cyme or citrus, the top flower is already open, and actually the ones below it are like these ones, are the ones that are not open. Also here you can see the ovary is above this disc in the case of so it is superior ovary in the case of citrus. Another part, very important aspect of the flower is the pollination. And the pollination is transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma. Who does that? It can be the wind, insects, humans, other animals, and we call them pollinators. The plants are called pollinizer. So pollinizers are actually plants, but pollinators is anything that pollinates the flower. What does pollinate means? It means transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma. That is what pollination is. As you already know by now, pollination carries the pollen, and that will lead to fertilization. That means the combination of pollen and ovule, one set of chromosomes from the ovule, one set of chromosomes from the pollen. It creates a new zygote or embryo with two sets of chromosomes, and this happens in all organisms. A second fertilization happens that creates the endosperm, and that's called 3N. So embryo development from seed goes to the ovary development, and that ovary is actually develop the fruit. What happens if you don't fertilize the fruit? The fruit will drop, okay, unless the fruit can grow without pollination, and in that case we call it parthenocarpic. Parthenocarpic, that means it doesn't have to have pollination to grow. It doesn't even have fertilization. And examples like Tahiti lime, banana, pineapple, navel oranges, seedless, anything seedless is parthenocarpic. That means they can develop without fertilization. But other plants like mango, like citrus, like many others, will have to be fertilized. Otherwise, fruits will not develop. Now, this pollination process can be self-pollination or cross-pollination. Usually, genetically specific pollen for successful pollination is called self, and the plant usually don't prefer self-pollination. They rather introduce new genes from another plant to themselves, and that's called cross-pollination. So with compatible cultivars, it's always better to have cross-pollination than self-pollination. So remember, plants always prefer cross-pollination than self-pollination. And the reason for that is introduction of new genes to the plant. Here is what happens, the cycle of pollination and fertilization. So you can see here the meiosis, which splits the chromosomes into two, and then after pollination they get combined again and they form the zygote. Very simple, you already know this. Okay, so this is the pollen tubes that germinate, and this is the pollen grain. So that's about pollination, and I will stop right here, continue in the next lecture. Good luck.